I'm speaking to you now as residents of downtown Rochester to call attention to the housing crisis for low-income families in Monroe County. As a community member, I feel I have the responsibility to inform myself about all demographics. I've grown up very lucky, and I realize now that is extremely rare. As a child, I took for granted that I lived in a house where I had my own room and a big backyard. I took for granted how great the public school systems were in my town, and I took for granted having food on the table every night. It wasn't until I started working in Philadelphia that I realized many people right here in America are suffering from poor living conditions. As a dancer, my company would do outreach performances at public schools in the outskirts of the city. As we drove through the city, I saw young children sitting on porches of houses that looked like they were abandoned. The structures looked as if they were about to topple over on them. I quickly learned that extreme poverty is not just an issue in other countries, but in our own backyard. I have lived in Monroe County for 2 years now, and I have grown to love the city. We have a great arts community and fun restaurants, but we also have a large portion of residents living below the poverty line. More than half of the population in the city of Rochester is classified as low-income households, and there is a scarce amount of subsidized housing. This puts a strain on many families. In addition to not getting enough housing, we see very few low-income housing opportunities in the suburban areas of Monroe County, meaning poverty is concentrated into urban areas, and furthermore, that minorities are concentrated into downtown Rochester. Within the city, 4 of the 10 planning sectors account for nearly 80% of all racial minorities. You may ask how this happened. Why would we be this segregated in modern America? The unfortunate reality of our city is that we only have enough subsidized housing for 1/3 of low-income families living in Monroe County. Subsequently, when these families are finally off the ever-growing waiting list for subsidized housing vouchers, they are only given 60 days to pick out an apartment, meaning that families can only choose from what is available in that short period of time, and as it stands, over 80% of the vouchers are for apartments in the city of Rochester. This leads to most low-income families living in one area. The concentration of subsidized housing vouchers is extremely unfair because it is hard for low-income families to find opportunity to live in the suburbs. The surrounding suburbs have much better school districts for families with children. Recently, there was a single mother who had gotten lucky enough to find housing in the suburbs. She unfortunately had issues with the landlord and applied to move. But because of the short timeline to find a new place, she wasn't able to find another suburban apartment. This meant she was forced to move back to the city and send her child to a different school. Downtown Rochester should not be the only place you can raise your child. Just because you aren't making 6 figures does not mean you are worth less as a person. It does not mean your child deserves less, and it does not mean that you have to put up with these conditions. Families living in poverty need to come together and tell our elected representatives that this cannot go on. Local government has the power to change legislation to make more subsidized housing required so that the waiting list is no longer 6,000 families deep. Legislators should also extend the timeline required to choose housing when using a voucher. This will give families more options on where they want to live as apartments become available. Legislators should also demand that the distribution of vouchers is less concentrated in the city and more spread out into the suburbs. We need to advocate for ourselves, but also for our community members and neighbors. We need to inform ourselves about this problem because, like myself before investigating, many do not understand the urgent need for more housing opportunities. We have numbers on our side because way too many people are affected by poverty in our city. If we all came together and agreed to inform our community, speak up, and vote, we can really make our local government notice. You deserve a good roof over your head and the security of raising your child in better school districts. This is long overdue. Children can't stop growing, they can't wait for schooling, and they need help now. We need to let local government know that everyone is worthy of acceptable living conditions. Our elected officials need to hear our voices. If we write letters, make calls, and peacefully protest long enough and passionately enough, they will have to listen. We can't let the wealthy population, afraid of change, dictate what happens to our community. We need diversity, opportunity, and equality.